Welcome to our new podcast with myself, Kate Belmonte, and my green colleague, David Wilkins, talking everything from technology to green politics and taped up toilets to wearing bulletproof vests. So David, how do you use a smartphone when you can't see the screen?
The iPhone is designed with something called VoiceOver, which will turn what's on your screen into speech. All iPhones have got that function on, and it's the only phone I know of that has it. There's talk that Android is developing something which is meant to be even better, but it's not guaranteed, whereas with the iPhone it is. That's why I'm an iPhone user.
I see.
The trouble with a lot of social media is that it's all on the screen and it's all pictures. And that means unless there's text in there that describes what the picture is, a screen reader can't do anything with it.
So is it literally, it just goes silent, you can't navigate
it's a graphic,
around
so there's
it?
nothing for it to read.
No.
And the trouble is that social media is becoming more and more pictorial now. Most technology is all about visuals, which means if you've got no sight, that's really bad news.
So I wanted to ask you, firstly, how would you describe yourself? Who is David?
How would I describe myself?
Yeah. In general, who are you? What do you like?
I'd say I was an ordinary person who just happens to have a sight problem and a hearing problem as well. That's how I'd describe myself. I don't see myself as anything that special, really.
So what's your likes and dislikes?
I enjoy adventures, so I love to travel. I love new experiences. I love meeting new people. And I enjoyed studying and learning more things about the world around me. I'm learning 2 languages at the moment, and I do hope one day to have a family of my own. What don't I like? I really struggle in noisy environments. Although I said I like travel, I struggle a great deal if I travel somewhere and there's nothing there for me there's no one there to support me, there's no one there to help me. So when I went to South Africa and when I went to Mongolia, the first question which I asked them was, I'm totally blind and I'm partially deaf, do you think that's going to be a problem? And I had 2 answers. You can decide which one was the better one. One said, if you're confident enough to travel here, your disability shouldn't be a problem, so you can come. And the other one said, we've never had anybody with those challenges before, but I don't see why we can't give it a try. Which one do you think I went for?
I think you went for the first one.
Nope, I didn't.
No points for me. See, I would have thought from reading what I have read that, yeah, you would have taken on the challenge even more, but at the same time, I mean, I don't know.
You cannot, if you are blind, you cannot travel somewhere when you don't know what's waiting for you at the other end. Travelling somewhere is easy. You go on a plane, you get in a car, you get the taxi. Once you've got there, the trouble starts. So South Africa had never had anyone with those challenges before, but they immediately admitted that that was the case, and they said, but we want to give it a try. Mongolia didn't even really engage with me about what could be done and what couldn't be done. They just said, oh, if you come here, I'm sure it's not going to be a problem. And the last thing you really want to do is touch down on the tarmac of Umbato Airport, and that's when you discover they have no idea what they're doing. You can't go home, you can't get it sorted out, and you've got no one there to help you.
So are you yet to go to Mongolia?
I am. It was a real shame. I did fancy riding the Mongolian steppes on a pony and trying their fabled tea with salt in it. But no, so far it's not happened. Actually, what turned me down from Mongolia was when I spoke to the guy who was running the internship on the phone, and he said, well, I was thinking, David, that you wouldn't go to the newspaper where you'd be based. And I said, but that's where my internship is. Yes, David, but I thought if you stayed at the community centre where the internships have been arranged from and you wrote blogs, the newspaper would then publish them for you and you wouldn't have to go into the newspaper office. I said, I'm not doing that.
So you might as well have been stuck in an office at home then, surely.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
And it was an internship I was paying for.
Oh, okay. So you weren't...
Well, both of them were.
employed
South Africa was an
then.
unpaid internship and I had to pay the fees for the internship. But I paid up because the agency was so good.
And you stayed there for 4 months.
Oh yes, I have no
Yeah.
regrets about South Africa. I had some exciting experiences. I had some terrifying experiences that you won't find in my blog. And I had some experiences that I'll never forget.
And why would you not write about the terrifying ones?
Well, there's no need really. The blog is just an outlet for my journalism work, so there wasn't a space to write it down. But one night I decided I wanted to meet some South Africans, so I took a cab to a nightclub in the city, and then I went back home at 2:30 in the morning. I was still sober because I knew that I was going to arrive on my own and I was probably going to have to leave on my own. And I didn't want to risk trying to find my way home when I was completely hammered. It's a risk you don't want to take, especially if you can't see. And I got the cab home, and the cab driver dumped me in the wrong road, which turned out to be the most crime-infested road in the entire area.
Wow. And how far did you walk back, or did you
I
manage
didn't
to
know
get
where I
another
was.
taxi?
I didn't know where I was, so for all I knew, I was miles away from home. I couldn't call anyone because they would say to me, "So where are you?" And I would say,
I
don't know.
Oh.
I'm somewhere in Cape Town, I think."
So how did you manage to get
There's
out of
only
that
one thing you can do
situation?
when that happens, Kate. You carry on walking and hope the first person you find is going to help you and not try to nick your phone. But in truth, the phone I had then was a clapped out piece of junk, so he was welcome to the thing if he wanted to take it. Yeah, luckily I bumped into a hairdresser who was out for the evening, who took me to the local security company and then got very irate when they tried to say it wasn't their problem. They were going, "Well, he lives just a road away. He can find his own way. You can't leave him wandering around in the road at 2:30 in the morning."
So she had your back.
She did have my back, and they got me home in the end. I was only one road away from home, but Lower Main Road was the most crime-infested road in the area. On Monday at work, my colleagues were going, "David, do you have any idea how dangerous that was? You must never, ever go out on your own again, all right? You call one of us." Yeah, I said, and then took no notice, as we do. We're young, we know everything.
Speaking of age, may I ask how old you are?
32.
32. I'm 35, just so you know. So we're pretty close in age. Did you grow up in Gillingham?
I did, yes.
Did you go to a regular school?
Yep, I went to a regular.
In brackets?
I went to several regular schools, mainstream schools. I went to Meredale School and Wakeley School in Rainham. Mm-hmm. They've now been combined into the Riverside Academy. And I went to Robert Napier School in Gillingham for my secondary school till I got my GCSEs. But then I had to get my A-levels, and we went to a specialist college in Worcester for that. So that was my 2 years at specialist school for the blind.
So did you learn to read Braille straight? Is it the same process as
right from the
reading
beginning.
words?
I started learning Braille at the age of 5. I've always been blind, so if I didn't learn that, I would have been illiterate. This is why there's a big debate in the VI community now about whether the appearance of more technology, like speech programs, has made Braille redundant. My argument is that it's done nothing of the sort, because if you do not learn how to Braille and you are blind as a child, you won't be able to read.
No.
And if your hearing ever gives you any problems, it's far too late to learn Braille, and you're in big trouble if your hearing starts to go.
Well, it's like the debate whether children should be learning to write still, being that they can type on a computer. But you need to be able to be self-sufficient in whatever area that is, regardless of technology.
Well, the whole invention of Braille was because before it was invented, children couldn't read. There was nothing for them to read.
No.
If they were blind. And so that's why Braille was so important. And it's also why I would be very much against anyone who tried to argue we didn't need Braille anymore. But then again, a large number of people who have gone completely blind have gone completely blind at the age of 50 or over. And for them, it's too late to learn.
While we're talking about images, when you dream, how do you dream? Do you dream?
No idea. All I know is that there are sounds instead of pictures.
Sounds instead of pictures. Obviously,
everything's sound. So I don't understand. I don't understand how a sighted person can dream. I doubt you would understand how I can dream.
No, it's very interesting though. One day that they might be able to hook the brain up, and I know that the neurological advances to what's happening where in the brain is coming on leaps and bounds. So it'd be very interesting one day if that is a possibility to see or hear, isn't it? That'd be amazing.
Possibly. I don't really see it as a big deal.
No, well, I find it extremely interesting in terms of I can close my eyes and remove sight, but to experience that like you do all the time, it interests me as to how you view sounds in a different capacity to what I would view sounds.
Yeah. Well, actually, I think I'm a little bit different to a lot of blind people in that respect, because you do not find many blind people who are in the position my brother Samuel and I are in, which is we have no light perception whatever. That's very, very unusual. Most blind people have got something. They can see a bit of light, they can see shadows, they can see colour. I can't see anything at all.
So it's literally darkness.
Not even dark. I've got no light to compare dark to. So it's just nothing. So it was far more upsetting for me when I was 13 and discovered I was going deaf. I'd accepted I had no sight and that was just the way things were. But I was far more upset when I was 13 and the doctor said they were going to have to fit me with my first hearing aid. And then when I was 18, they had to fit me with hearing aid number 2, which I'd fought very hard not to have because I couldn't see. I did not like the idea of giving up sound, but now I'm dependent on my hearing aids. No hearing aids, I can't have a conversation with anyone.
So may I ask if is there a genetic link to this?
I thought you were going to ask that. It's Norrie disease.
Norrie disease.
Norrie. It's a very rare genetic disorder which causes loss of sight, which me and my brother have, loss of hearing, which we both have now, dyslexia, which I've got, autism. It causes inability to walk, which it's not done to me. It causes some severe mental health problems, which we've managed to avoid as well. It has caused seizures too. Some people have died from those, and we've missed those. It can make you dumb, which is obviously done to me, and it can make you ugly, which explains why I'm still single.
You're funny. So, I presume you've had scans of your brain over the years?
Just
MRIs.
one. Just one, to make sure I had one.
And you have definitely got one. Did they confirm
Well, they found
that?
something in there,
or
much
are
to my
you
surprise.
a walking miracle?
Pardon?
Or are you a walking miracle without a brain at all?
I've sometimes wondered if I am, considering that no one will employ me, but yes, I think I do have a brain.
And so are you and Samuel twins, or were you born at different times?
We were born at different times. Norrie disease is a condition, the girls carry it, the boys get it.
Right, so your mother was the carrier, I
Yes, she was, and she had no idea until after I was born.
And it was literally a 50-50 as to whether...
Yeah.
And
I mean, some girls have had it as well. There's a lady called Selena who I know who've got it, and I've made friends with a family in Slovakia whose little girl Julia has got Norrie disease as well. She is also blind, so we met... Actually, we first met when when her mum was joined a Norrie disease support group in Facebook, and I just sent her a message to say hello, and we got talking, and she was saying there was very little support for Julia in Slovakia. She didn't know what Julia needed. She didn't know how to motivate her, didn't know how to play with her, and I said, "Oh, she's just a baby. You treat her like a baby.
Yeah.
She can't see pictures, so she needs noises instead." Lots of physical contact, lots of cuddles, talk to her a lot, play her sounds a lot, see if you can get her to react to them.
So at what point, or what age did you realise that you couldn't see, but others
I don't know.
could?
I think
Was
I
there
just
a
came. Dad
defining
says I just
moment?
came home from school one day and said, "Mrs. Fitchett, my braille teacher's blind like me," and that's all it was.
Oh. So up until that
There was
point, do
never
you think
really
that
there
everyone
was never
the same?
a climactic moment where I realised I was different from other children, and that was the way. But that's probably because my sister could see and I couldn't, and I'd grown up with that. Just like my sister Deborah has grown up with two brothers in the house who can't see, so for her that's normal life.
Normal, yeah.
She can't understand why anybody would see that as strange.
I find for my condition, as it progresses, I'm constantly reevaluating what I can and can't do. And you were talking earlier about going overseas and doing some very adventurous things, and I still haven't got the guts, I suppose, to go on an aeroplane with the wheelchair in tow to then so
Every
I
person's
can't
need
get over
is
that
different.
barrier.
I think it's wrong to say just because so-and-so can do that and they're disabled, that means I should be able to do it too. You have to think a bit more carefully about something like that. I don't think it's right to say that just because I can do it, every other disabled person ought to be able to do it too. But I certainly think it's worth pushing your boundaries and seeing what you can do. I mean, the last foreign trip I went on was to Israel. And that was my first trip there, and I went because we found a group who would support me. And most other groups, when I've talked about going with them on something like that, refuse to let me come. And most groups in the local area won't let me get involved with them either.
And is that down to a lack of understanding or a lack of wanting to be
health
bothered
and
to do
safety
things?
is becoming an
You
absolute
said about
pain
this,
at the moment, and it's always being used by people who don't want to do something. I would just say, if you want to try an adventure, one thing you could look at doing, and I really would recommend this if you're able to take a holiday, but I know with kids it's harder, is the Jubilee Sailing Trust. And that is this is one of my favourite holiday destinations, and it's more ecological than plenty of others I've come across. It's a company that designed fully rigged tall ships to be sailed by people who are disabled.
Okay.
So if you were to come on board one day, you might see a blind person steering the ship using a talking compass to keep it going, and you might find a wheelchair user climbing the mast.
Oh, wow.
So they would be using their arms to pull themselves up, and they would be being lifted by a hoist which is being run by everybody on deck. And whatever your disability is, you're expected to muck in and be part of the crew. It's really, really brilliant. Unless, of course, you don't like water.
I used to do something similar over on, well, not similar, it's much smaller scale, over at Arethusa, where the dockside outlet
Oh, yes,
is.
I know Arethusa.
I think that was more going along for the ride rather than partaking in sort of a team activity as such.
Yeah, but it's really good, actually. I mean, some blind people don't like the JST, but that's actually because they're so fiercely independent. They don't like the idea of being part of a team. Their complaint is that the JST never let them do anything. I said, well, they do. You're just supposed to be part of the group, that's all. So you do things together. Don't want to do things together. I want to do it on my own. I'm going, oh, fine. So when it's team and it's cup of tea time, instead of just having a cup of tea as and when you feel like one, when you're on watch, you go down and make everybody one, or someone else makes everybody one. And the question I got asked by blind people who didn't like the idea of that was, well, what if you want to make it yourself? And I said, well, you can, but it's rather nice if you make it for the group.
So how many times have you been as part of this group then?
Let's see.
JST?
Let me think. Valencia, Canary Islands, Denmark, France, Corunna, 6 times.
Wow.
We had some interesting experiences. I mean, some days we had really, really horrible weather sailing from Bergen in Norway to Den Helder in Holland. That was really horrible weather. The other one that really stands out was actually my trip to Corunna in Spain, because everything that could have gone wrong on board that voyage went wrong. I mean, everything. We arrived to discover that we had to stay in port for a bit longer because they had to weld in some new wheelchair lifts to the ship, and they had to wait for the fire crew to come off strike. They were on strike over something, and you can't do industrial welding in a port unless you've got a fire crew on standby in case something goes wrong. The next day, the winter vomiting bug hit the ship.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes.
Oh, all of you?
I didn't get it.
Oh, you're lucky.
But at least half the crew were down with it.
Oh, no.
So I sent Dad a text on the Wednesday. 2 days later it went, "Hi Dad, news from the ship. The captain's sick.
Oh,
The first mate's sick. The engineer's sick. Oh, the carpenter's sick. But the welders are here."
Oh, it sounds like one of those films where it's disaster and you've got that's the first part of the...
Well, what they did was that they offered you the chance of going home and getting reimbursed, going home for a couple of days to prove that you weren't sick and then coming back to do the voyage, or going home and booking another voyage for free. I chose to go home for a couple of days and come back and finish the voyage. Except the wind decided we weren't going to Corunna.
Oh.
The wind was blowing in the wrong direction every time we tried to get out of port.
It sounds like a cursed trip.
And so we sailed out of port, ran to Falmouth in Cornwall and had to stay there for a day, ran for Brest, and the weather was so bad when we docked in front of Brest we had to stay there for 2 days.
Oh no.
And I mean, the ship was tied up to the quay and it was still pitching up and down.
Ooh.
So the weather out at sea must have been horrendous. And in the end, half the crew had to go home because they'd taken a week off work to do this voyage and they'd just run out of time. And we sailed to Corunna in the end, but the Bay of Biscay was absolutely insane. It was so brilliant. I loved every second of it.
I've not been there, so...
The Bay of Biscay has a reputation for being about one of the roughest voyages available, and it really was that time. They'd had to tape up the toilets because on one side of the ship, only on one side, because the water was, if they didn't tape up the loo, the head, the water would have been sloshing out of the toilets and all over the floor and all over the deck every single time the ship moved.
Oh.
And there was no sleeping on your side in your bunk, which is how I'm used to sleeping, because the mattress was at such a strange angle that if you tried lying like that, you just got rocked back and forward across your bunk all the time.
Oh no.
I never had so much fun in my life.
Yeah, I'm not sure that that's for me now.
Oh, it's not normally like that. On calm seas, it's very nice.
Never
But
mind
it's not a cruise
seagull.
liner. Cruise liners are for sissies.
Wow. But I've still got dreams of going on one. Just so I
sure
can
you'd
have
be
a go
fine on
in
a
their
cruise liner.
swimming pool on the sea. Just sounds exciting to me. So when I first arrived, you were talking about deciding to join the Green Party.
Yes.
Shortly after the referendum. I presume that was because you were upset with the results of the referendum and you wanted to join a party that
I wasn't happy with the result, but I accepted it was a democratically elected result. One of the weaknesses of democracy is it doesn't necessarily mean people will make the right decision. They will make the most popular decision. But I did feel the environment was something I cared about, and I had been toying with joining a party for quite some time, and I decided to go for the Green Party.
Because you worked in the European Parliament.
I did.
For
I
some
worked
time.
as a press intern in the European Parliament for 5 months.
5 months. And you lived there, obviously, the whole time you were there.
I did. I stayed at a Catholic commune in Brussels called La Vielle, just up the road.
And you were fully engaged within the EU Parliament.
Not really.
No?
My job was just to do what they asked me to do. And it let's just say it had the potential to be a fantastic experience, but it wasn't.
Oh.
It was just a good experience.
Were you pigeonholed, do you think?
Yes.
Were the other interns treated differently to you?
Not necessarily, but they also felt I was being pigeonholed and weren't happy about it. I mean, lots of them felt like I had the potential to do far more. My friend from Portugal, whose name was Tiago, got very upset about the whole thing because he felt that I had the potential to be involved in something like the general election and in other issues, the European election and in other issues that were going on, and it wasn't happening. I mean, it wasn't just me. Other people, other interns also felt they weren't being given anything to do. Diego was one of them because he'd been a journalist before he came to the European Parliament. And it was very much like being in an internship from university. I mean, very often people would look on Facebook half the time because they had nothing to do. Or they would kick a football around the office and break something because there was nothing going on. And they still kicked the football around the office.
And what year was this that you were...
2018 to 2019. I mean, I'm glad I went because it was a better use of my 5 months' time than sitting at home whinging I had nothing to do. But there were times when I just texted Dad and said, I want to go home. I don't want to stay here anymore. I'm just sick of this. Strasbourg was the worst because that was supposed to be the day when you, the week where you go to the European Parliament in Strasbourg when it opens and experience everything. And I spent most of that time sitting in a room with my boss sitting across the desk from me, working hard on something, and she refused to give me anything to do at all.
Oh.
So I just had to sit there staring at the wall, wishing I had something to do. Apparently what you're supposed to do is go and watch all the primaries, but let's face it, there's only so much of that you can do before you're bored stiff.
Yeah.
It's not very exciting. And it's...
So you didn't really get to see... I suppose you saw the bureaucracy of it, maybe.
The what, sorry?
The bureaucracy and the paperwork and the boring stuff.
There was no one to take me.
Yes, you missed out on being within the Parliament and seeing how it works within...
Oh, we saw some of that. Yeah, I mean, it's very difficult to make it interesting, I've got to say. I can understand why lots of people don't have a lot of patience with it. It's very clunky and it's not... The disability support is not brilliant.
So is
Their website's not fully accessible and it's very difficult to get them to do something for you.
See, I can't understand why an organisation, an institution like the EU Parliament would have a website that wasn't fully accessible.
Because they haven't got anyone to make it fully accessible and tell them how it's meant to be done. They just go through the motions of doing it, and if it costs a lot of money or if it's complicated, they don't do it. It's the same everywhere.
It surprises me.
I mean, the reason I more or less fell out with Labour was over Jeremy Corbyn's attitude towards disability when I personally asked him a question about it. And I don't mean I wrote him a question, I actually asked him a question.
And what was your question?
I've always been told, sorry David, if you're disabled, you can't be a journalist, you can't have this job. How does Labour intend to help disabled people get into work without them having to resort to the courts?
And his response?
If the Tories hadn't cut legal aid, you could take these people to court.
Oh, well, that's not a solution.
And I sat
is
there
it?
going, you haven't listened to a word
No.
I said, have you?
Don't you want to avoid court? Not
Exactly. And I want to avoid court because I think if it ends up in court, it's going to end in heartbreak, even if you win. Because even if you beat your employer and they give you what you want, your employer has the potential to then make your life miserable.
Horrendous, yeah.
And he's not going to want you back if you've just bested him in court.
Exactly.
So I believe that trade union work should all be about negotiating, but it's not anymore. It's all about we'll get you a lawyer and we'll see if we can sue these people, or we'll see if you've got a legal case. And if you haven't got a legal case, the NUJ can't help you. So when I went to college in Brighton and was studying journalism, I felt the college where I was studying journalism didn't understand disability needs, and if understanding them that meant they had to change something, they didn't want to hear about it. So when I actually said to one of them, look, the students are just going off to lunch and they're going off to get things and they're just leaving me here, could you not just encourage them to support me somewhat? And the tutor said, sorry David, we can't. Because the students have paid to come to this college, they haven't paid to look after you, so we can't ask them to.
But they couldn't even run an inclusion workshop or something along those lines.
Oh, the students didn't pay for that.
Right, so that they'd not got the money, in brackets.
Oh yeah, pleading poverty was their favourite argument. Whenever I said something hadn't been done for me, they plead poverty. And when I said to the NUJ, I've got to go and argue with these people about this and try to talk about it, could I not at least have an NUJ member in the room with me just to hold my hand, so it doesn't feel like me and my family against this establishment?
Yeah.
The NUJ said, we can get you a lawyer, David, but that's it.
Right.
And I just do not feel the trade unions are doing their job anymore. I joined the NUJ because I felt that as a disabled person, it was good to get a union on your side anyway. But also I felt that if I joined some of the higher up organisations in the trade union, I might be able to provide a better deal for workers in my position. And I've not been able to do anything like that. And I'm now at the stage where I just want to dump the whole thing altogether and don't want to be involved anymore. And I think that says a lot about the fact that they're not doing their job properly.
Does a union exist for blind and partially sighted people? Or
it would be too wide. I think
too wide in
you
it.
couldn't really do that because the trade unions are supposed to be about a particular job. So you have the National Union of Journalists, you have Equity that deals with people who are actors and people who are writers. You have the GMB trade union and Unite who deal with office workers and that kind of thing. I think it would be far too big an area to try to make a trade union like that. The best you could hope for was trade union members working together on this issue and actually having a big collaborative movement that dealt with people who had sight loss issues. But unions don't like working together. They make a big fuss whenever you try. They go, this is our patch, not yours.
Tribal. What was it that first drew you into journalism?
I've always loved writing. I still do. I love writing. I love recording. At the time I started in journalism, I thought it was because I wanted a writing-based career. And I knew that unless I was very lucky, I wasn't going to make any money as a writer for a long time. Not unless you're very lucky indeed. And even someone like J.K. Rowling had to deal with a lot of rejections before she got her book published. Name me someone who's as good as J.K. Rowling. I can probably name 2 or 3 writers who are just as good, but who lots of people haven't heard of. So I was looking at the possibility of a career. At the time, I was reading about Ian Fleming, the author of James Bond. At the time, Ian Fleming was my favourite author. I've still got a soft spot for him, but I'm convinced if we met, we wouldn't have got on. And I was looking at this, and I read that Ian Fleming had been a journalist before he was a writer, and I thought, I know, I'll be a journalist. But after studying journalism at university, reading books like News from No Man's Land, which is John Simpson's story of arriving in Kabul on the liberation of the Taliban, and doing some work with the BBC World Service, 12 hours a day for a 2-week unpaid work experience, 10:30 in the morning till 10:30 at night, and 2 shifts of 9:30 in the evening to 9:30 in the morning. I thought, I love this work. I want to do it. I want to carry on doing it.
What areas? Because obviously you've got a very wide spectrum of interviews and articles.
Yes.
How do you decide I want to look into this and I want to write about this?
Well, often if it's my blog, it's just an interesting person who I come across who I think might be willing to be interviewed. That's how that worked. But when it's journalism work, I'll do whatever I'm asked to do. But my main interests are probably international affairs, politics, Africa and the Middle East. My dream is still to be the BBC's foreign correspondent in Jerusalem. Oh, no, hang on. Jerusalem might be a bit boring. Maybe I'd better go to Kabul instead. Or Damascus.
Do you want to go somewhere where you wear a bulletproof vest? Is that the plan?
Well, I've got more of a chance of being shot at if I go to those places, haven't I? Unless I join the IDF on the Gaza border, that might just do.
Are you a man of faith? Are you Jewish or Catholic or what?
I'm a Christian.
You're a Christian?
Yes.
So you don't have a denomination other than you believe in...
I go to the St Mark's Church in Canterbury Street, but I see myself as a Christian who just happens to belong to the Anglican Church. But I am an evangelical Christian, but I'm at home with Catholics, I'm at home with people who are Anglicans, I'm at home with people who have gone to more charismatic churches like the NFI Church or KICC, which is just up in Buckmore Park.
Yeah.
And I'm at home with Jewish people.
And do you find that your faith has helped you over the years? Or...
It has indeed. It has indeed. It's one of the few things that's kept me going, actually, especially at times when things have been especially frustrating, like the current situation I'm in with the government. I still believe that God's got something happening here, but I just don't know what yet. I'm convinced that when I went to Israel, God's plan was that I would go with the group who I went with, And it's ended up with me being asked to go to America, even though lots of my liberal American friends are doing everything they can think of to persuade me not to go.
And why is it they don't want you to go?
They don't like Liberty University. It's about the most... it's one of the most evangelical universities in America, if not the most. And for that reason, my more liberal and secular friends think I shouldn't be going anywhere near it.
Okay. See, I'm agnostic, so I'm not sure what I believe and what's there. I used to be fairly religious up until a few years ago. Christian, Protestant, I suppose you'd call it. But yeah, I class myself as agnostic now. But I feel the sadness knowing that what I did believe, I don't have that same connection anymore. And at times, it's same as what you've said, it did get me through some dark places. I don't know if I'd want to go to America and experience quite, what's the word, extreme faith that a lot of Americans are renowned for.
The thing is, the people who I was with in Israel had this extreme faith which Americans are renowned for, and they were very sensible, very down-to-earth people who I really respected, and who, people won't like me saying this, but they've treated me far, far better than liberals have. I felt like a member of the family with them. I felt supported by them. I felt that I was just part of the group. Where at the last trade union meeting I went to, I felt like a black South African living under apartheid, invisible. And that the Braille tablet you've seen me using, I have because my friends at Liberty University helped me to buy it. When I was grumbling that the Braille machine I was using had a lot of problems and I didn't look forward to trying to get a replacement for it, unbeknownst to me, they started a crowdfunding campaign to raise money for it, and they gave me about $3,000.
So is that the situation where something that is for a disabled person is extortionately more expensive than it should be?
Not really.
No.
I don't think there's anything extortionately expensive about this machine. It's a complicated piece of kit, so it would cost something like $4,500 to buy.
Do you mind showing me? Because I'd be
Sure,
quite
I'll get
interested
it.
in how it works.
Yeah, so they bought it for me.
Mm-hmm.
They supported me when I got really badly sunburnt in Israel, and I mean really badly sunburned. They turned into second-degree blister burns by the time I let someone look at them.
Oh, David.
My roommate happened to be a doctor who was training to be a surgeon called Joseph. And every evening he'd go, right, David, take your t-shirt off. I want to have a look at those burns. I want to bandage them. They're more militant about abortion than I would be. They're more militant about LGBT issues than I would be, but I have sympathy with their views. I certainly wouldn't agree with them on gun control, but then I don't live in a state where it's believed gun control is in the manifesto and everybody has one. But I think Joey would be a fantastic doctor, and if he was a doctor near me, I would recommend any sick person I knew to go and see him, because he's the kind of doctor who, if he was dealing with a distressed or upset patient, he would make time to calm them down and assure them that he knew what he was doing and there was nothing to be frightened of, and he would take it personally if something went wrong. And you don't get many doctors like that. Lots of them just don't have the time, and some of them choose not to make the time. Anyway, right, so what you have here is a Braille Sense, which is a Braille tablet, and I use it for reading, I use it for taking notes, and I use it for controlling my phone.
So does it record and note down what we're saying?
No,
or...
it does have a recorder, but I'm not using it. I just use it for writing.
So how do you write then?
Okay, what you have here are 6 dots, so I'm going to put this on your knee. Yeah, you've got 6 keys there, and their different combinations make up letters. So A is dot 1, B is dot 1 and dot 2,
okay.
C is dot 3 and dot 4, D is dot 1, dot 4 and dot 5, and that's how I write.
So it's almost as if you were typing, but you're creating a code, I suppose.
That's right.
And how many words per minute can you...
I don't know. No one's ever actually
tested
timed me. But,
interesting, wouldn't
and
it?
it all depends on what I'm writing.
And how about reading speed?
I was going to show that to you. So this is let's say I wanted to read from one of my books, and we'll choose. Lots of people like this one, so I'll go for Empire of Silver by Con Eggleton, which is set in Mongolia, and this section is the story of a Yan rider. That's a Mongolian messenger who's riding with a message for the heir of the Khan. He doesn't know what it is, but we know the message is that the Khan is dead and he is now the next Khan. So I'm going to read, you just stop me when you've heard enough, okay? The moonlight was strong, the air clear and cold, as the Yam rider galloped at full speed along the dusty track. He was weary. It was hard to keep his eyes open, and the ache in his lower back had become a jarring pain. A sudden panic gripped him as he lost count of the way stations he had passed that day. Had it been 2 or 3? Karakoram was far behind, but he knew he would have to hand on the bag with its precious contents. He did not know what he had been given, except that it was worth his life. The man from Karakoram had appeared out of the darkness and thrust it into his hand, snapping hoarse orders. He had been galloping even before the man dismounted. With a jolt, the scout realised he had almost slipped out of the saddle. The warmth of the horse, the rhythm of the hooves, the bells that jingled under him, all of them lulled his senses. It would be his second night without sleep, but with nothing but the track and the horse for company. He counted again in his head. He had passed 6 of the way stations, changing horses at each one. He would have to hand over the bag at the next one, or risk falling on the road. In the distance, he saw lights. They would have heard his bells, of course. They would be waiting with a horse, a spare rider, as well as a skin of arag and sweet honey to keep him going. They would need the other rider. He could feel exhaustion washing over him. He was done. He slowed to a trot as he reached the stone yard in the middle of nowhere, the visible sign of the Khan's influence and power. As the yam staff clustered around him, he swung his leg over and nodded to the spare rider, little more than a boy. There had been a verbal message as well as the bag. What was it? Yes, he remembered. Kill horses and men if you have to, he said. Ride as far and fast as you can. This is for the hands of Gayuk alone. Repeat my words. He listened as the spare rider said them all again in a rush, overcome with excitement. The bag was passed from hand to hand, a sacred trust, never to be opened until it reached its destination. He saw a stone seat in the yard, some sort of mounting block perhaps. He sank onto it gratefully, watching the lad begin his run before he allowed himself to close his eyes. He had never run so fast or far in his life, and he wondered what could possibly be so important.
That was amazing. I mean, to you it's completely normal.
I told you about the Slovakian family I was in touch with. They actually came to the UK, and so I wrote to Tamara and said, do you want me to come and see you, and we can just talk about what Julia might need and bringing her up and that kind of thing. And I'd hoped Mum and Dad would come with me too, but or at least Dad would, but at the last minute they weren't available, so I went on my own and I spent a whole day with them.
And how old is she now?
She's now nearly 2, but when I saw her the first time, she was about 3.5 months. Yeah, I felt pretty inadequate, actually, Kate. I'm not a parent. I've got no idea what kids need, what parents' concerns are for a child.
Nobody does until they have them, though.
Pardon?
But nobody knows what parent they're going to
be
like until they have them.
Her mum seemed to be really happy that I'd come to see them. I think she needed to be reassured that Julia being blind didn't change anything.
No, and what an amazing example of a human you are.
One of the reasons I stayed in the Green Party is because I was really impressed with Jonathan Bartley, one of our leaders. I actually think he's a great guy. I think some of our friends in the Green Party have grumbled to me that he's too slick, but I actually think that I think he's a genuine person, and also when I spoke, because his son is in a wheelchair, when I've asked him questions about disability, I've had a proper answer from him.
He's experienced it from a perspective.
So
that
when you
most
ask him
people
about
haven't.
it, you get the feeling he's not just going through the motion. Oddly enough, there are only 2 other politicians who have given me an answer like that about disability, and neither of them is British.
Oh, okay. So who were they then?
Jerusalem's former mayor, Nir Barkit, and Rabbi Yehuda Glick. Both of them are in the Likud party, the ruling right-wing party, but they both gave me the impression they understood disability issues and cared about them.
Okay. So what do you think needs to be done in order to become more inclusive? Because you mentioned that you're a bit nervous about trying to go to the conference, the Green Party conference in October.
I'm prepared to go if I get a proper answer from them. Very often it's down to the individual who's handling it. If it's someone who knows about disability, you're fine. There aren't any problems. If it's someone who doesn't have a clue, that's when I'd be concerned. What I've found with my work with disability is, even though it's not supposed to be like this, it's often more down to the individual than it is down to the system. If you've got someone who's great, they can make even a broken system work. If you've got someone who's not great and doesn't know what they're doing, even a good system can go wrong if they don't listen or they don't make the adjustments they're meant to make. I've got a lot more faith in the Green Party than I have in other groups. I mean, I think one of the reasons that Liberty worked so well when I went to Israel wasn't necessarily because of the group, but because of the lady they'd found who provided support for me. She was very, very sensible, very down to earth. I couldn't quite believe she was only 19, actually, because she had a very, very old head on her shoulders, and she was extremely sensible about everything.
So that was my first interview with David Wilkins back in July 2019. Since then, David has appeared on the BBC South East news programme and has sailed from Liverpool to Portsmouth and appeared on stage in front of 12,000 students at Liberty University in the US. This year, he is volunteering with Medway Night Shelter and is busy learning 2 new languages. David is finally in receipt of housing benefit, but because of the system, this will not be backdated, leaving him in debt for the foreseeable future. Thank you for listening to our first podcast. This is Kate Belmonte, and on behalf of David Wilkins, we both thank you for listening.